Welcome back to Radio Taiwan International. You're listening to Geek Out. What's your cup of tea, tickles your fancy, or floats your boat? Join us as we share passions from people in Taiwan and around the world. I'm your host, Michelle Chang, and today in the studio we have my two very good friends, Helen and Kim.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, guys. What are we geeking out about today?
We decided to discuss diet when moving to Taiwan in the sense of diet restrictions, whether that's health related or
otherwise, right?
Personal choice.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's actually something that I really wanted to talk about and we haven't yet spoken about because, you know, like I said, most of our listeners are outside of Taiwan, really curious about the food here. And as listeners know, we are in Taipei City. And that is actually fantastic in many ways. There's so much food here. So usually there are a lot of options. So how do we all eat?
So I'm vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
I've been vegetarian in one form or another since about the age of 11. And I was, for a short period of time, pescatarian when I first got here, which means that I was eating fish, but then very quickly went back to full vegetarian.
So by vegetarian, you mean ovo-lacto?
Yes.
And that means eggs and, you know, dairy, basically.
Yeah.
I don't actually know any vegan people.
I know a fair
anyway.
few here.
Yeah, but there is quite a community. Buddhists specifically have a vegan dietary requirement if you're very strict in your beliefs, which is actually quite different from vegan as we know it in the West. Not only can you not have basically any animal product, but also no garlic, no onions, no chilies, any flavors that are very quote unquote sinful. So yes. How about you, Kim?
I only discovered my dietary restrictions, most of them, here a couple of years ago.
How long have you been here?
11 years. And I'm like, what? Almost 40.
I know, right?
40 next year. And I only learned that I was gluten intolerant last year, I think.
2 years. I think it's been 2 years.
Oh, I have no concept of time.
It's fine.
And then I discovered I was lactose intolerant when I was like 20-ish, maybe.
So basically you were a full-fledged adult when you mostly discover your dietary restrictions. I guess I am playing for the most populous team here, which is the meat eaters. I'm I guess the opposite, where I'm very picky when it comes to vegetables. There are only some that I will eat, as my friends know.
Because you give them to me.
I personally have been here on and off for a very long time. I think I arrived first in 1996. So a long time. And I've kind of watched the development of food culture here. How about Helen? We never touched on how long you've been here.
So I'm here 10 years as of August.
So we're all kind of long-term folk and we really understand where to eat.
Yeah, I would say as well is my experience coming here being vegetarian, I think is very different to what I've heard from American friends' experience coming here.
Interesting. How so?
In the sense that my American friends were coming from mostly cities or places where there was an established vegetarian or vegan kind of community where they have a lot of good vegan and vegetarian substitutes, like I think it's the Daiya cheese. You could easily get plant milks, things like that. So when they came here, what they couldn't get, certainly 10 years ago, was more of a challenge. Now it isn't, was a Western style of vegan or vegetarian cuisine.
Right.
So again, as you said, Buddhist obviously tends to avoid chili, spicy, anything with heat, anything with onion in their vegetarian meals. So for them, that was a very big palate change.
Right.
And at that time, there were only a couple of Western-style vegetarian places starting to open. I come from Northern Ireland, which is very rural. And growing up, I was one of the only vegetarians I knew. There's me and one friend. I would regularly ask in restaurants, it's like, is this vegetarian? It's like, it's vegetable soup. Is it vegetarian?
Right.
It's vegetable soup. What did they make it with?
What's in the broth?
And they'd go, and I'd go check. They'd come back and they'd go, oh, it's got chicken in it. Yeah, so whenever I came to Taiwan and discovered that Buddhist vegan restaurants exist, which is a restaurant where I can eat everything
on the menu, yeah.
For me, that was amazing. Like the fact that I could easily access vegetarian food, that I could easily access plant-based milk. So easy. And even surprisingly for me, was whenever we went to places that were, say, fish restaurants
Oh, yeah.
in the middle of nowhere, like Xiaoliaoqiu, Lanu.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We were there with meat eaters, and if I went up to the boss and said, I'm vegetarian, all of a sudden she's like, no problem. I'd get
Oh, that's
6,
great.
7 plates.
Wow, so
You know,
accommodating.
all the vegetables could be very quickly changed.
Right.
Okay, we'll just not put the oil on it. And I'd have 10 options of tofu.
Mm-hmm.
Until I came to Taiwan, I had never even eaten tofu. Because
Really?
you cannot... Even today, whenever
That's
I
surprising.
went home in August, my local supermarket had 1 tub of long life silken tofu.
Okay.
That was it. That was the entirety of the tofu available in my... And when I say local supermarket, it's a big supermarket.
Oh,
It's a big
It's one of those
Tesco.
giant, like, box
Chains.
shops.
Yeah, it's a big store. And they only carried 1 brand
That's
of tofu, and it's
disappointing.
silken tofu, which was not what I
difficult
wanted
to
cook
deal
with.
with. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to cook with because it's silken tofu. If listeners don't know, is very fragile.
Yes.
So it turns into mostly mush if you try to work with it.
Yeah, I eat it every day, but I eat
It's
it
delicious.
in smoothies. I throw it in a smoothie to make my smoothie creamy and to add protein. That's not what you want to cook whenever you're cooking dinner.
Yeah,
Like,
you
not
get,
necessarily.
if you want to
There are
stir
other
fry
ways.
something, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree. In Taiwan, it's really easy to find Buddhist-based, plant-based diets, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people who are moving here expecting the same assortment of vegan, something like oat milk, almond this, and whatever it is, in the fancier shops in the U.S., might not have been able to find these products
Yeah.
a while ago. Today, however,
Very different.
Yeah, today is very different. We have multiple higher end. Is it higher end?
There's been a big influx of the barista style oat and almond milks.
Yes.
Oatly is readily available
Mm-hmm.
now for the people that are brand loyal. And this is in addition to like actually good quality soy milk. Like soy milk is not a challenge.
Yeah.
You can get any type of soy milk
Yeah,
you
we
want.
are in Asia. We have soy milk.
Yeah, like that's nice. So you can always get, there are
Barley, I think there is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't have that.
A number of things.
online, you can now readily order specialists.
Mm-hmm.
Like you will pay a premium for it, but you can get your import.
Yes.
There is a vegan supermarket where you can occasionally get the Daiya cheese and imported vegan
That's
brands.
excellent. And there are more and more restaurants opening that cater specifically to vegan or
Yeah,
others with
there-
dietary restrictions.
Yeah, and there are some fantastic Western vegan restaurants now.
Mia Cucina.
Mia Cucina is a great
Right,
example of
herbivore is
vegetarian.
delicious.
Herbivore, I think they have 4 branches. There's the MK,
They have a branch
A-
that's
Yeah,
It's
vegetarian.
Strictly
yeah.
vegetarian.
strictly vegetarian. They also own 3 Idiots, I believe, which is a vegetarian takeout place.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's called The Three Idiots.
Yeah, it's like
I was like, God, Helen,
oh no,
why?
no, no, it's a great restaurant. And also the fact that, yeah, if you go to pretty much anywhere else, with the exception of the American and the Japanese restaurants, they have something vegetarian. Even the sushi places have a few vegetarian options that are vegetarian vegan. They have tofu with rice. They have vegetable options that are vegan.
Yep.
So pretty easy to eat out here. We've been talking about going for a hot pot later, which
Oh, yes.
for anyone that isn't familiar, that's DIY, cook your own soup.
It's like,
But-
I like to liken it to, oh my goodness, I forgot the word. With the cheese thing?
Oh,
Fondue?
It's fondue,
Yes.
thank you. That's what it was. I likened it to fondue, but very
Fondant.
it's
Sorry.
it's broth.
yes.
Sorry.
So it's not cheese, it's broth, and then you order the things that you want to cook in said broth. So it's like fondue. You know, you get to do
Yeah.
that at your table with your people.
And while most restaurants will only have one vegetarian option, they still have a vegetarian option.
Yes.
And usually vegan. And for even if you go night market, which is obviously, if you ever visit Taiwan, the first thing people say is
Yeah,
go to the night market.
Yeah.
Night market is easy for vegetarians. At first glance, everything looks like meat, but you can get 2 or 3 different types of either grilled or deep fat fried king oyster
Oh,
mushroom.
those are so good.
You can get dikwa chow
Sweet potato balls, yeah.
balls, which are amazing.
They're fried and lovely.
They're
actually.
really good. You can get so many choices even in the night markets. The only thing that can trip you up is some things look vegetarian.
Oh, yes, this is true.
And this is where you need to be careful if you're strict, because they do like to add,
Fish oil and shrimp paste.
usually not fish oil, usually it's pork oil.
That too, yeah.
Lard.
The more expensive, the more likely they're using lard in their pastries, especially flaky pastries.
Well, it's in the base traditional recipes, and unfortunately, it is also expensive, which makes the cost of the product more expensive. But
so it's some of those things you need to check is like, do you use lard? Most ingredients, as far as whenever you're purchasing stuff, are on there in English and Chinese.
Yeah.
So it does make it easy if you can get the ingredients. The only other thing then to bear in mind is, again, if you're strict, anything fermented tends to have shrimp in it somewhere. Or if you have a shrimp allergy. Kimchi and chow tofu, stinky tofu, also very traditionally uses shrimp to give it that stink. They take it out after, but it's in there. And if you have an allergy,
that's pretty bad.
That is something you do need to be aware of.
I did have a friend, his name is Steve, shout out, Scuba Steve, we call him Scuba Steve slightly ironically because he is allergic to all shellfish. In a very bad way, like EpiPen way. And I'm surprised that he did not have a single episode while he was in Taiwan for, I think he was here for like 3 weeks eating. Because obviously people who are very, very allergic and or extremely intolerant of certain things, like people with celiac, can't even come in contact with small amounts of things like shrimp or gluten. So how about gluten? Tell me about it. Well, first of all, tell me about
the allergy.
Yeah, let's explain it to folk who don't know.
Well, okay, so gluten intolerance is an allergy similar to people who have lactose intolerance, basically. Except for me, having both, the stomach aches I get from that are way worse. It includes things with wheat, barley, rye, and I'm doing real good with my allergy, clearly.
A lot of things have gluten.
Yeah,
gluten and yes, itself is like a protein binding agent within that item.
Yes.
So it can be extracted. Usually it's in everything.
Yeah, and it's what makes things taste good generally. So like, you know.
Yeah, because you're talking then that's going to be your bread, your noodles, your beer.
Gluten is used in a lot of sauces, like
soy
salad
sauce.
dressing. Yeah,
people don't know that, but gluten is all over soy sauce. Yeah.
As again a thickening agent, very typically.
Yeah, and so it's when you live in Asia and your options are soy sauce and noodles. It's not great. So
hey, at least you have rice going for you.
Yeah, but diabetes runs in the family, and if you overdo it on rice, then that can contribute to getting it faster, so to speak.
Blood sugar bouncing, basically.
So I also have to be careful with that because it does run in my family. My immune system was wrecked for my whole life, basically, not knowing I had this intolerance. And now it's a lot easier to go cook for myself. But as far as going out to eat, that becomes a problem quite often because people don't realize flour is wheat.
Exactly. It's a very strange, weird disconnect here.
Yes.
And I've explained my theory to you, but let's tell it to the listeners. Now, a lot of people in Asia just think they have a bad stomach, like they have a bad constitution. They just don't take food well in general. But because of the lack of gluten-free options here and just the knowledge of gluten insensitivity and allergies, I do think that there is some degree of gluten intolerance in the people in the population, and they just don't know about it.
I think it's also, if you look at gluten intolerance in the West, well, I know of it, which is not much. The higher processed, more modern, fast processed breads and products like that tend to be higher in gluten because you have your factory processed bread can be turned around in the space of 4 hours, whereas traditional breads and traditional wheats were much lower in gluten content and were also then processed for a much longer time.
Right, thereby being more expensive.
So if you look at, say, sourdough has very little gluten left in it by the time you actually eat it. Tastes way better. And for someone who has a very mild intolerance, if that's what you're eating, you probably won't even notice it.
Exactly. There's not much of an effect.
Whenever you get into a more serious case or whenever you move into something like celiac disease, obviously you're talking about a very different situation.
Of course. Don't do it at all.
But
it's
just
zero.
But just an allergy or intolerance, the less processed the food is, I absolutely agree, there probably is less of a chance of having a reaction.
I can confirm because sourdough, I used to eat a lot of sourdough sandwiches and I would always do really well, like at Schlotzsky's in America, where all the sandwiches are made with sourdough. And I loved Schlotzsky's, but then I would go to like Subway and I would sick.
Well, yeah.
Right? And pizza, sick. But in France, I would eat the bread And it's always fresh bread in France.
Oh,
just about. And I never got sick on a single thing I ate in France.
Actually, this is a topic for people who are not dietary restricted, but coming into Taiwan, Taiwanese bread is an acquired taste.
It's interesting.
And
it's
it
different.
is so sweet.
Yes.
It is near on impossible to find good quality bread here without paying an arm and a leg.
Yep.
Well, partially because they have to import the wheat, right?
Yeah.
But
Well,
continue, sorry.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a style thing, not necessarily that in the sense of even the bakery bread, and I'm talking like the good bakeries here. They have some amazing bakeries. All of the bread has so much sugar in it. And it's very soft. They like a really soft. The concept of toast.
Or sourdough, as we've mentioned before, is really alien to a lot of people here.
Yeah, sourdough is becoming very fashionable here. So
Good.
it is actually getting easier.
There is a sourdough pizza place now.
Yeah, and I would say if you're coming here and you cannot get bread that you can eat, pick up the French baguettes.
Yep.
They're the closest thing to a good bread that is easily available.
I think they sell those at
Carrefour
Paul's.
sell them.
Paul's.
Yeah.
I go to a German bakery to get my gluten-free bread.
They are
make
very
buckwheat.
good.
Yeah, I took you once.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very weirdly
Yeah.
different baked good
It
culture.
is, yeah. Now, I know some of it is very much kind of the Asian style, like a lot of scallion, a lot of onion breads.
Savory breads.
Which are great. The other thing, speaking from a vegetarian perspective, especially at the time when I first came here and I couldn't read any Chinese and couldn't speak Chinese, they love to hide stuff in bread.
Oh.
So very often you will pick up what you think is a bread roll. The Chinese will say bread roll.
But there's a hot dog in there.
You gotta turn it on a tip, turn it upside down.
Yep.
Because the hot dogs sit to the bottom.
Yep.
They also love a cheese bread. Now, to me, whenever you do cheese bread, if it's mixed in, it's going to be grated up fine, so you get like that nice cheesy flavor. A Taiwanese cheese bread is cubes of cheap cheese, cubed, and it is important to emphasize the
It is
cubed,
a cube.
are mixed in to a really good quality artisan bread with the cheapest cubes of bad mozzarella.
And it doesn't melt. It doesn't melt. when
It
you
doesn't
bake
melt. It
at all.
sweats.
Because
it
it's
sweats.
cheap.
And then the last one that they love to do they're a really beautiful sliced garlic bread that is really popular. Looks amazing, except what they put in it is like a bad cream cheese. It's very sweet. It's not like an American cream cheese. It is a very sweet cream cheese that they then bake in the bread. It's not added after. So it's been baked. It's kind of slightly dried out. And I'm just like, the concept of add the cheese later does not cross their mind. Or even just make a garlic bread. I miss
Right.
garlic bread.
You think you do.
I could make you a gluten-free garlic bread, but yeah, it's like the cheese bread baffles me.
I enjoy
So
that they make
hungry.
me things because I hate cooking.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. You actually very conveniently are located in between two cooks right now.
That's right. My mom always used to tell me that I could burn water.
Oh, I have done that. I put a
have
hole
as
in a
well.
pot. My dad was not
I
happy.
also did that once, and I texted her, and I was like, "You were right." And you know, so
Yeah.
like, but for me now, with the discovery of my allergies and stuff, I have to cook more often than not because the places that I can go to are either too far away or I have to Uber Eats it, and like I don't
Or
go out-
expensive
and
It's
as well.
expensive.
Yes.
Expensive.
And but one thing that has happened recently over I would say the past 2 to 3 years as well, and I kind of want to blame COVID for it honestly because everybody had the time to step back, recalibrate, and redo things, especially restaurants, is that they've started labeling things better on their menus at not just mainstream, so to speak,
But
restaurants,
almost
but
all
quite a lot
restaurants,
of
yeah.
restaurants, and they've become more conscientious of more like niche, so to speak, allergies, and but they're not just labeling them in Chinese.
They're also doing it in English.
So like, so for anybody here that's not sure where to go, like Tosteria labels everything with specific allergies.
Their wait staff are also very well
They
trained to
are very
ask.
good. They ask, but when you order something, they will ask you this. They will not so much ask you, but they'll remind you like this has this, and this. Is that okay for you?
Look, I've always been a proponent of paying service staff
Tipping is a good practice.
I mean, you have to pay them for what they're worth, and they're worth quite a lot because they have to do a very complicated job, and that's a whole nother episode entirely.
Yeah, but just
But for anyone first arriving in Taiwan, if you are craving pasta or a good salad,
hummus.
good salads are very slowly coming in.
Yes.
Very slowly.
A good salad or a good sandwich, toasteria is probably one of the recommended.
For people who are interested in moving to Taiwan or people who are already here and having some trouble, what can we say to them about their dietary restrictions?
I think the first thing is if your issue is that you don't find vegetarian food that you like, it's probably that you need to start to try outside of your traditional
Bubble, right?
Yeah. So try the traditional vegan places. There's some really big sit-down family meal places. If you literally don't know what to eat because you are a strict vegetarian and you don't speak Chinese and you don't know how to communicate that, look for the Buddhist monks.
Yep.
If the Buddhist monks eat there, you are guaranteed it is going to be vegan. It might not be to your palate, but it's definitely going to be vegan, meat-free, dairy-free, everything free.
Yeah.
The other thing to look for, which we were joking about prior to recording, is the swastika sign.
The swastika.
Swastikas in Taiwanese culture, and is it Buddhist or
Is it
Taoist?
Buddhist specifically? The swastika is
slightly
actually
different.
It's reversed.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is
it's a reverse.
different.
It's a reverse swastika.
So really the opposite of Nazis.
Yeah, so
Which is what you want, right? Like
in Taiwan, if you see a food stall
that you think is a
or
swastika.
a restaurant and you see a swastika on it, that's where you want to go eat. So it isn't a challenge. And even outside of Taipei, it's easy. You can go up the mountains in the middle of nowhere.
It's actually
You
better
can-
almost.
You
outside
can
of Taipei.
always get some vegetables and some rice if you just tell them I'm vegetarian.
Yeah, usually those establishments are really flexible. about it.
Yeah.
I would say for people with allergies, like in my case, don't be afraid to ask to be accommodated for. The Taiwanese people are lovely. I've gone into smaller towns, into random mom and pop restaurants and asked them not to give me the bread on breakfast sandwiches and they'll be like, fine, that's cool. And they'll just give me everything else. It's a good rule of thumb to have translated all of your allergies and have them handy. And if somebody can't read, which is actually not that uncommon here, have it recorded in some fashion. You can just Google pronounce blah, 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 and it'll, wow, there was my teacher side. And it'll say it for them, and then they'll know they have to be mindful of X, Y, and Z. It's not hard to navigate your allergies here. I'm just lazy.
Oh no.
You can also use something I did when I first got here was I saved pictures
Oh, good.
with a red cross through them.
Universal sign.
So yeah, just showing like animals, products that I don't eat, and like just this and that. Especially for the older generation, they're pretty quick to catch
Of
up.
course. Yeah. Thanks for geeking out with me, guys.
Yeah. So basically, I think it's a good place to come for regardless of your dietary restrictions.
Absolutely. And thanks, listeners, for tuning in to Radio Taiwan International. I'm Michelle Chang, and we'll be back next Thursday with another episode of Geek Out.